So, again, welcome everyone to this final seventh roundtable session of this wonderful series that we've been hosting from the European Alliance for Regenerative Agriculture throughout this autumn winter. There's been some great topics and some great speakers, and here we are with one of the big topics as well, which is public health, better food. And what does regeneration and regenerative methodology have to do with all of that? So exploring um, the route from regenerating soils to a regenerative medicine and health. It is a topic of interest to so many people, and especially nowadays. So I'd like to ask our first farmer guest of this evening, Justina, to please, from Lithuania, to please introduce yourself to the group. Thank you and welcome.
Hello, everyone. So I'm Justina from Lithuania. Our farm is located in the northern Lithuania. Well, our journey to the regeneration was quite interesting, and it started then we moved from the town and start our life in the countryside. And we had maybe half of hectare of land, and we just wanted to grow the food for our family, maybe to sell the surplus. But well, we bought the cocoa seeds. I remember that, and because we knew that there is a huge difference between conventional plants and the heritage one. So we planted those seeds in our sandy soil, which by nature is not very fertile. But to add more to that, that land was 60 years arable land. And all the conventional practices like heavy tillage, pesticides, fertilizers, and glyphosate was very common. And well, we didn't have any harvest that year, and we conducted the soil test. Um, we saw the reality. Basically, the soil was empty. Then we get that report from the laboratory. All minerals were in red. So basically, there was no minerals, and the soil carbon content was organic matter, I guess, to be precise, was 1.7. So basically, it was beach sand. So it's also worth to mention that at this point we were vegans, also as our little kids, and we were vegans for 5 years. So it's enough time to start see the health problems which vegan diet brings. So I started to search for solutions how to solve all the health problems for my kids. I ended up finding GAPS diet and Western A Price Foundation and all the regenerative food, not like from farming, but that we need regenerative food. And I mean, regeneratively grown food. And but we were vegans, so going back to eating animals was not so easy. And we couldn't go back to the supermarket products because I still to this day agree to all that vegan community is saying about conventional farming, especially animal farming. It's basically true. It's cruel. Um, that's not how animals supposed to live. So we started to search for farmers who, for example, grow chickens without soy and corn, because I was aware of omega-6 content in those crops. Uh, and because the chicken is monogastric animal, it it just has a lot of omega-6 from those crops. So we wanted grass-fed and grass-finished beef, and well, it took for us maybe 1 to 2 years to realize that it's just simple mission impossible to find such a farmer. And keeping in mind that we have a degraded soil and degraded health, there was no other options just to become animal farmers by ourselves. So we started from the chickens. We raised them in the Salatin or Perkins type chicken coops. We moved them daily, twice a day. And even after one season, you could see the benefit that animal brought to the land. Then we wanted to introduce the herbivores. So we started from the goats, but I can not say nothing good about goats. So we get rid of them. They're wild animals, actually. So later on, we found out that the regional park near to us has small herd of animals from some kind of project where they were required to graze natural, biodiverse actually pastures in the river valley. So we took that herd and we were required to graze that pastures, and we still do it to that day. And only on in winter time when we go back to our place, we do bale grazing and actually bale grazing and chickens. There was two factors which showed us how important is animal impact on the soil and what can it do. So yeah, and till this day we have chickens, but we don't sell them because there was some issues with that. We just grown for our needs, and yeah, basically we are cattle farmers right now. So that's, I would say, it's our journey.
Wow, amazing, Justina. Every time discussing stuff with you is always just a learning curve, and just how strong and how much power there is in motherhood and in wanting your children to be healthy and yourself to be healthy for them is just incredible. A mother or father capable of anything. We have others in the room as well who are also absolute heroes in that sense to benefit their own kids and their family health. And so, speaking of health, let's ask our friend Jared, who is in the room. Please introduce yourself and your journey with regeneration and health and everything that how that is all connected.
Yes, hello everybody. Thank you for the invite. So my journey in that whole space started actually with sports. I grew up in Rhineland in Germany, but found to American football. Started as an athlete in the University of Wisconsin, and it's a tough sport, and regeneration plays a big role there. After my athletic career, I went into coaching professional sports, mostly in ice hockey. And ice hockey is a very dense sport where regeneration plays a really big role. And I wanted to grow as a coach, and I wanted just to become better for the kids, for the boys, and also some girls. So I started studying medicine because I found that the medical support was not very great for my feeling for the athletes. And also, I had a grandmother who was suffering from Alzheimer's, and I saw how helpless kind of the medical field was. And I was just really interested just to grow and become of better help for the people around me. So I started medicine, and I realized something, and it felt like from my eyes, as we say in Germany, that we are really good at practicing acute care in the Western medicine we learn in the United States and Europe. Like we are such developed countries, and when we fall from a ladder or we have an infection or disease, we have really great care. But we do not have great care when it comes to chronic disease, when it comes to preventing chronic disease, and also when it comes to treating chronic disease. So that's when I realized in medicine we do acute care, but all those lessons that I've learned from sport, all those lessons that I've learned from how the human body adapts to nutrition, to training stressors, to sleep, and all, to emotional stressors, to social environments, all those lessons I haven't found in medicine, and I was really surprised by that. So after I did that, after I finished medicine, I got together with a group of people that had this similar experience, and we said let's start an institute, and we call it the Institute for Regenerative Medicine because we said like there's acute medicine, but we need regenerative medicine, and be like a place where people with chronic disease can come to get professional medical help, holistic help, where we look at the important factors the body needs to really restore itself. Because most of chronic disease, and we really have an exponential problem with chronic disease, most of chronic disease is an issue in the body's ability to transform and to transport energy. And it starts with the simple process of breaking down calories into the biological constituents that we really need to heal a nervous system, to heal an immune system, and to also heal a healthy metabolism. And when I want to really like break it down to something that really struck us as really helpful, highly important, and I wish every doctor would really know about this, is the importance of micronutrients, electrolytes, vitamins, minerals, and some things that regulate the immune system, and how lacking we are in the food system we have today. So that's how we got more and more into touch also with the farmers around here, because we found also our patients, they struggle with food. They have so many conflicting messages around food. And we just wanted to help them to build a more healthy relationship with food, to be able to touch it, to see it, to feel it, and also to understand how it grows so it's a healthy food. But what we always tell our patients is calories are cheap. Like you can easily buy cheap calories, but to have the micronutrient density that your body really needs to heal, to recover, that costs a little more. It costs a little more time, a little more energy. It usually takes more time for those foods to grow. It needs more context. There probably more bacteria, more fungi around this. So we teach our patients the whole idea of the biome, that they are living in a biome, their food grows in a biome. And this is how we got to regenerative agriculture as well. And we found that most of the principles we practice in regenerative medicine are very, very similar to when I talk to regenerative farmers. It's almost like we're doing the same things, just using a different medium. So that's how I ended up here as well. We have one woman here in our institute, Anja. She works at Soilify, which is a German organization caring about German soils. And she connected me to your roundtable, and I'm happy to be here and discuss. I have some questions to the farmers as well, to some specific nutrients and how they grow in the plants, and because we see some deficiencies in the plants. Where there's good data on this. I see it in my patients. I do like probably around 1,000 extended labs per year, and we have some really good database to say we see some typical deficiencies, and they are highly correlated with symptoms, with chronic disease. And when they change their food and they get those micronutrients back in, the body has a chance again to really regenerate.
Wow, Jared, it's amazing, super interesting. And like Justina, you have first-hand lived experience of what it is to be healthy and how much food has to do with that. So fascinating conversation that we're going to have this evening. And Jose Luis is another person, another of our guests, a farmer member of EARA as well. And he's also fascinated by nutrition. He's a vet and also a father. So he is very much in charge of the health of many little beings that depend on him. And so he's on a long journey here of finding out how to do that better. Jose Luis, tell us about your journey.
Thank you, Anna. I have to stay here taking some notes. And Simon, can we increase the time for this conversation maybe to 5 to 6 hours in order to answer all the questions that I have taken notes here? So yeah, thank you first of all for this invitation. I am a equine vet. I have stayed all my professional life studying and working with sport horses. But in my last employees, I was the manager of a very big ranch with horses. And some crazy woman started to speak with me about how we can improve the management of our pasture. So he told me, have you ever heard something about regenerative farming? I said, ever. You know, in the conventional veterinary student, no one speak about how to feed only with grass. You know, even in Spain, that we have a lot of tradition to keep the animal outside, but it is not. And suddenly I arrived to this movement, and it's like a, you know, bomb in my main, like, oh my God, this is because, you know, do you know that it's so interesting this point, because, you know, from the Romans, the Latin language, there is the main sentence where we study veterinary is a sentence that say in Latin, "Hygia pecoris salus populi." So that means that the health of our animal farms is the health of the population. And when we arrive to the regenerative concept, we add to this concept, the health of our environmental. So thinking only that we are going to add and working together with the health of our ecosystem, welfare of our animal, because it's my main reason when I decided to start my own farm, is because only animal welfare. I have to say that. But all the rest of the thing came with that. So we are keeping animal in an incredible welfare condition, improving the quality of our environmental, and also producing food that Gary that spoke about density, nutrient density. You cannot compare this kind of meat when you are speaking with other kind of production. So I'm so interesting. I am so glad because I have 3 small children, so I have not much time to study about nutrition, and also I had to start my farm selling directly to the consumer. But the good news is that the farm goes very well, and nowadays we are producing about 400 chicken per week, so about 25,000 birds per year, sending to the entire Spain, Portugal, and also France, Germany, and also we are processing 6 cows per month. So it's beautiful how the demand is growing up, and also the research and the politics and the also financial actors are so interesting. So I think that we have a mandate as farmers to start to research about how we are going to be able to scale this kind of production, because we truly need to offer this kind of feed to the entire population. I truly want to be able to arrive to this point, and also study about the global concept, the effect that, because when we're speaking about the cheap meat, it's because we are not putting in this price the price of the environmental effects that we are producing, and for that we can pay less than €2 for a kilo of conventional chicken. And another point is because we are paying this cheap meat indirectly, but the main payer for this cheap is the chickens, that they live in that kind of horrible conditions. So it's beautiful how we must to start to work together, studying the environmental, the food, animal welfare facilities. This is one of the main things to how we are going to develop this knowledge about technical knowledge on farms. So yeah, I'm so excited for working on this.
I love it because Jose Luis used to come to courses like a decade ago in regenerative agriculture, and he was very skeptical. He's a very scientific person, so he's needed to test it and prove it himself on his own farm with his own animals, and then research the science. And he's also starting to participate in scientific research himself, which is great. So we need farmer scientists who can bring that data to the table as well. So our final guest, last but not least, Stefan, all the way from Utah State. And you are focusing on the links between all of this: sustainable food production, nutrient density, human health. Please introduce yourself to us.
Yes, my name is Stefan van Vleet. I'm director of the Center for Human Nutrition Studies at Utah State University. And it's great to hear all your stories. And Jose, what you said at the end, it resonates very well, I think. And so I am not a farmer, but I'm a scientist who studies these linkages. And what you're saying is indeed something we often observe also when we study nutrient density of chickens and other animals. So I have ties to Europe because I'm Dutch. So I was born in the Netherlands, and I spent my first 25 years of my life there. I did my undergrad in the Netherlands, and I grew up not on a farm, but close to farming land. So growing up, we did get a lot of farm fresh food. I remember always going to the dairy to get farm fresh milk, and we had a potato farm close by. And I think subconsciously, as I look back on it now, that probably cultivated that interest in those connections. And I came to the US when I was in my mid-20s for my PhD, which was focused on sports nutrition, actually. So we had a little bit of a resonated what you said to me. That's how I got into healthy eating as well, and wanting to know it for myself, and it became researching it. So I did my PhD. Then I worked at medical schools for postdocs at Duke University and Washington University in St. Louis. There, really, what I found was, and that's why I really like what you were saying, is that we were oftentimes the patients, our focal group focus was on metabolic disease. So we have people with non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, and maybe people that were morbidly obese, and maybe people that typically have some sort of metabolic disease. And if I just look at even the patients in the hospital, what we were feeding them, I was like, no wonder these people are also not getting better, because there's really poor quality food, right? So, and then one thing we were never thinking of in being at a school of medicine was the connection with agricultural schools. Does the way that we produce our food actually impact the nutritional quality and human health? And I started to drive my research program into that area. We really started with livestock products, so beef in particular. Looking at how does feedlot beef, in the case in the US, where there's the dominant production system, differ from animals that are out on pasture. So that's about as big of a discrepancy as you get. And what we found largely is that, well, it can not be surprising. A cow is just a mammal. So if you feed cows on a diet for 4 months that is maybe not as optimal for their health, it puts on fat, it's efficient, I get that part, but probably from the health standpoint, it's not optimal. Or animals are out on pasture for 4 months, when they're finished, you get about the same result as you would put a human on a Mediterranean diet versus a maybe not so healthy diet. So it's really interesting to see those phenotypes that you get. So it kind of comes back to the fact that the saying that Jose had of like, what you do to your animals, we do to ourselves, right? Indirectly by the animals we eat. And how that impacts human health is something we're really studying now, but we can't say that the animal's health is impacted by that very much. And what we're typically seeing is that these linkages of plant diversity, much like humans, where we know dietary diversity is a key piece for our health. We see that the same thing is the case with animals. If they have a ration versus maybe a diverse pasture that they can select from, or their feed is more diverse, this is a good thing. And more in recent times, we started to move into crop research as well, where again, we're looking at, do crops grown in more regenerative systems where there's maybe multiple crops, maybe there's animal integration. Do we see that linkage between soil health? And while I would say it's early innings in the research field, you do see that these linkages are starting to appear. So, and the other part of the research is that we started some randomized controlled trials over the last few years, where we're feeding people food from regenerative systems versus conventional systems to see how that impacts their health. One thing that we're finding is that just not consuming the standard Western diet, if you just eat some fruits and vegetables, even if it's not from the most pristine farming system, that it really moves the needle already a lot. And then maybe that's not a surprise, right? Because if you're here right now with your health, you just start eating some fruits and vegetables and some meat, milk, and eggs, you get here. And then do you get further with over time with producing from regenerative systems? So that is my journey, and I look forward to having a broader discussion with you all.
And look at your views. I think the views from your office are incredible.
Oh yeah, no, it's a painting actually.
My God.
That's amazing, Stefan. Super interesting. You've already touched on a whole bunch of the topics that we're all so interested to know about, and where research is going with this. So I'd like to ask our colleague Simon Kramer, who has brought this wonderful panel together, together with Virginia as well, his team. Would you please lead us in, pull from some of the threads of this wonderful conversation? Where would you like to go next?
Thank you so much, Anna, and thank you to all the guests coming and discussing. I'm try to inoculate a little bit the emergence of this amazing milieu, and I think then also we want to go as fast as possible. If you guys can ask each other, please, and also all our guests, we'll try to make it as smooth emergence as possible. I think Garrett made a wonderful point, if I try to make some connections of what has been said already, to our very first webinar, which we named the Fourth Agricultural Revolution. And it was really all about photosynthesis, soil biology, and the better flow and more complete photosynthesis, complete flow of energy within the plants. And now we're coming kind of full circle to the animals and to our human health, and then optimally back to supporting plant health. And I wanted to ask, I think tonight we can go already showing that the kind of where the membranes of what we think scientifically know, what we here think where should be the focus to advance and legitimize knowledge that we in practice experience. And also, I guess one point of discussion really is we have a lot of talk about healthy diets and much less about healthy eating. And Garrett already told that his principles of regenerative medicine are kind of similar principles that farmers work with in guiding regenerative agriculture. And maybe that can also evolve into principles for healthy eating instead of pre-described healthy diets. And with that, I would like to start by giving back to Justina. I think a few months back, you made a wonderful LinkedIn post and kind of explaining how you, by coming yourself, and I was also vegan when I lived in the US, coming to an understanding of healthy eating and how you kind of bring that knowledge back to the people when you have the ability to speak with them.
Well, it's actually quite difficult to bring that knowledge to the people who are trained to think that plant-based diet is the way to go for all of us. Yeah, and it's difficult to believe for me in that because I know how devastating it can be, especially on the young ones. So yeah, I always try to say that not all meat is created equally, and we have to talk about that because now there is a cliche that all meat is bad because we have scientific proof that it can cause cancer for you or heart diseases, and I started to notice that people actually do believe in that, and they try to reduce the meat, and it's so funny for me that they reduce usually the red meat, but they keep on eating the chicken. And if we are talking about factory chicken, well, it's, as a humans, we have that knowledge that we have to eat the rainbow to be healthy, like as much different vegetables and fruits is better. So, but the chickens and it's actually for all animals, we do not apply that rule. So basically, chicken is grown on two crops, on corn and soy. So you can imagine how not nutrient dense it is, and it's so funny for me that dietitians recommend eat chicken and not poultry and not beef. So it's very interesting for me, and I always try to introduce that beef can be healthy, especially if it's raised on the biodiverse pasture, and it can have in that meat. I mean, Stefan would definitely explain it better, but all the phytochemical compounds found in meat can be anti-cancer and can be anti-heart diseases. So how can they claim that meat is bad? I mean, beef is causing cancer or heart disease, it's one point. And it's so funny that we as a humans were eating meat for so long time, and now we blame meat for all the chronic disease we have. It's nonsense.
Thank you, Justina. Yes. I mean, Jose Luis made a statement already, which kind of, I feel, mix up all his becoming as a scientist, as a veterinarian, and let's see if he considers also as a father, which was we have, and he already took in so much healthy animals. I feel like he said in his introduction, we have to offer this kind of feed to the whole population. I wonder if you meant also all humans, I assume. And what do you think your learnings of kind of scaling? You said you're already selling more and offtake is taking up. So Justina said a little bit where the deadlocks, let's say, where do you think this demand is picking up from? And then gladly, if you have a questions for the others, continue gladly also with that.
Yeah, it's a big issue because in any conversation that I have with the big guys, you know, they always compare with the industrial farming. It's quite impossible at the moment to compare because we are producing a different product with different prices, different cost, and different benefits. But I truly believe that we cannot forget the idea. It's so hard for me be part of conversation that, you know, beef is the responsible for, you know, climate change. You know, sentences that we need 15,000 liters of water to produce 1 kilogram of beef. This is absolutely a stupid thing that is running incredible fast and very deep in the internet conversation. Some population truly believe that cows are producing climate change and they are removing the water reserve from the population. So and it's quite hard for me you know, fight against everything because you know, when I'm part of conversation and scholarship with other farmers, I spend maybe the first 15 minutes to speak only about the meat context. You know, meat is the enemy. We are going to put all our eyes on the meat, and he's guilty for everything. So at the same time, we have to fight against all of those failed concepts, and at the same time trying to design how we're going to be able to produce on a regenerative way to feed, you know, the big supermarkets. And for that, Anna told that we need more farmer scientific or researcher, and my point is no. we need the scientific to do this their job, and we have to keep farming. So there is a lot of information currently about the, you know, the benefit on soil biodiversity. And I have also attached in the chat a beautiful research published this year, a few months ago, about, you know, in conventional farming, increase of biodiversity of all the animal beside the animal that we are keeping is one of the mainly reasons for, you know, it assumed that can introduce disease in our farm. But the reality is that when we study that in extensive farming and also in sustainable farming, they have checked that if we increase the number of vertebrae in the water point, in the water drinker for the animal, you say amphibious, birds, and as much of biodiversity of animal we have in our farm, decrease the number of pathogens that appear in the body of the animal, you know, in the cows, pigs, and sheep that we have in those farms. So we have to study in many different aspects to arrive to the common beauty that we truly have to change the total concept of, you know, farming that we are working in, because Simon, this is so important because our law are based on this previous scientific knowledge. For example, I am not allowed to have dogs keeping my chicken against the predator. It's absolutely forbidden in Europe. So I have no dogs on the paper. No, true. I have dogs keeping my chicken safe from the eagles. And anytime that I have a government inspection, I have to put my masting dogs in a car, bring to my neighbor, stay there for a few hours, and receive. Yeah, it's so stupid, and it's because our law is based on the idea that in order that we want to keep our animal health and safety, we have to keep separate from the nature. So yeah, I'm going to stop only with this because they're my first parts. But yeah, asking for the researcher and scientific to work together and prove that this is the best way to produce in farming.
Thank you, as always. Exciting, José Luis. I mean, there comes to mind some idea of also a commonality between the concept of negative freedom and the kind of how we believe in our food and safety regulation to enclosure or protect our farm animals from diseases and so forth, which, I mean, many of our farmers are struggling with daily, and I think just now the blue tongue in Europe is disproving that approach again. Garrett, maybe then if we lined it out and you already said it a little bit, maybe you can say what you think are these kinds of overlapping principles that you see in healthy living, healthy eating, and I guess healthy farming.
I would like to add some more specifics also on the discussion that Justina and Jose also started when it comes to the relationship, the specific relationship between different foods and also diseases, because we see many, many very severe diseases, be it neurodegenerative disorders, psychiatric disease, autoimmune disease, completely resolve. I mean, not in 100% of patients, but in way more than 30 to 40% of patients by really changing their food. And I would like to go into those details a little more because I feel many more people need to know about this and the possibilities. And there's a lot more research coming out right now. And when it comes to the general principles, one principle that I see is this, there's in economics, there's this term time preference. Like, what is your time preference? What time preference are you going for? Are you calculating in a way what's better for now? Or are you calculating in a way what's better for tomorrow? Or are you calculating in a way what's better for in 5 generations? And this term time preference, I see a very big commonality between when I talk to farmers and the way we look at medicine is what time preference are you looking at? Because when you make decisions for your own life with a time preference of now, you make way different food choices for yourself than when you have the time preference of 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, or even the health of your kids when you talk about motherhood and giving milk to the babies. You have a lot different perspective on this, and this makes decision making a lot easier also when it comes to this concept of discipline. Because when we go into food relationships, this topic of discipline comes up a lot. And the first couple of years we work with this, we try to avoid it, and then we try to overcome it. But now the way we solved it, we feel, and when it comes to working with the patients, is this term in this concept of time preference. Because when we make a decision for what I want to go for, how do I want to be in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, it makes it so much easier to make different decisions than I would be just looking at this time frame of today. So this emotional regulation changes when we have a different time preference. And when I talk to farmers in this regenerative space, they keep talking about long time preferences, generations, right? When we look at the soil and farmers talk about soil, they don't even believe that they can regenerate the soil during their own lifetime. And I myself believe I don't change chronic health in my lifetime, but we can really build on this. So this is what I really see is way different between the acute care in medicine and the regenerative care in medicine, and also between the conventional farming and the regenerative farming. And then also, obviously, this whole concept of the biome, like we are living in a biome. We don't live in isolation. In acute care, we like to look at the patient in isolation. We measure the patient in isolation. But in regenerative care, we look at the patient in a biome, in social structures, in food structures, in work structures, and in emotional structures. And this is when I talk to regenerative farmers, that's a very similar principle there.
Amazing, thank you. Yes, and always please bring in this more differentiation and all the knowledge you want to share. Yes.
If I may, I would like to add something to that whole meat discussion, because there was something that was really dear to my heart and was a big topic in the last 10 years for me, and because I found there's so much misinformation about this whole topic. Like, for example, when we look at the cancer-causing properties, red meat was never on trial for cancer-causing. It was the processed meats, basically. And also for the heart diseases, there's many meta-analysis coming out so far that the relationships between red meats and heart disease, the proposed relationships, they have not been established in any where they had to bring any hard burden of evidence. And what we see at the same time is in the population where there's a lot of fear of consuming so much meat. But we've been addressing this for the last years. We've wrote a series of articles on meat consumption in humans. There's been really good studies looking at it anthropologically. There's this group of Ben Dor of Tel Aviv University. They've really looked at carbon isotope analysis of human remains, and they found, like, until 35,000 years ago, we've seemed to be an almost pure carnivore. And when we look at anatomical features, there's many signs that we are at least omnivore and maybe even carnivore. And when we look at the current situation, by just analyzing people in their deficiencies, and we just show it to them, it really opens their eyes. And especially when we go into the treatment phase and they feel better, so less symptoms, they feel their body heals, then they really open up to this whole thing. And we felt, you brought up the discussion that it's hard to convince them health-wise. And for us, it's very easy to convince them health-wise. Like, we've learned so many lessons in the 5 years, but for us, it becomes difficult when this whole ecological question comes up, because we find it easy in the first weeks to bring somebody on this type of diet where they heal and they feel better, but then this certain aspect of guilt comes up in them. But isn't that bad for the environment? Am I hurting the environment? And we bring them to Alan Savory and other resources, but we can really benefit from having a much closer knit between, like, regenerative medicine and regenerative farming, where you can teach us so much more about what do animals really do and contribute to the environment. I mean, I'm starting to understand how soil sequester, how important soil is to sequester CO2 and all those things. But my typical patient, they don't know that. They only know what the media tells them, and that's basically cows fart, and then the sun gets hot. So we need to do a lot more education on that front and collaborate. Because health-wise, I feel there's so many more and more people wanting that type of medicine and wanting to eat better and better food. And Jose, you brought up the point, like, we have to produce more on scale. And that's the way I feel it in Germany, at least. There are some farmers that produce really good meat, but it's very hard. And it's basically like dealt undercover, like, what's the good connection of getting good meat? And it's very difficult for patients to just get the product.
Amazing. Thank you, Gerrit. So right over to Jose Luis.
I just want to add very shortly, Gary, that it's beautiful to speak about the timeline decision, because, you know, the first step in regenerative farming is define your holistic goal. And your holistic goal is a view to 10 to 15 years. And it's the first step. then you started to design your regenerative program and started to define your, but the first step is thinking your life in 10 to 15 years. It's beautiful that you speak about that. And yeah, the other question about the market is that, you know, because it's so hard for the farmer that we must to do everything well. You know, we have to define the perfect regenerative program, do the perfect research and study to prove the thing that we are doing, and also be able to sell directly all our product and bring them to the as much as population that we can. So for me, it's my experience that I started quite alone, because the kind of farming that we are producing in Spain do not receive any kind of public subsidy, because we are working in a forest area. So there is, you know, also the help, the public help that the farmers are receiving are working against regenerative farming. But beside that, it's quite hard. It's difficult, and it's a common feeling with regenerative farming, the feeling to feel alone. And for that is beautiful alliance like EARA, that we can work together, but don't be part of everything. You know, because our relationship is based on confidence. So yeah, I only want to add this beautiful concept about holistic goal.
Amazing, thank you, Jose. And I think also, I mean, time preference sounds also like we could do a great workshop with our parliamentary politicians to get towards a 5 and 10-year goal understanding. One tiny point, I don't know if Gerrit and Dolph already know each other. Dolph is here, and I mean, this guy is an amazing farmer who for sure is producing nutrient-dense stuff. So maybe Gerrit, if you haven't known yet, you can send patients right over there. It's close to you. Stefan, the others basically emanate a kind of understanding that this connection runs straight through soil health to plant and animal health, especially also animal health, and then to human health. And you in your first pitch were like, yeah, you studied this first connection and now you're studying this second link. Maybe you can tell us a little bit where you think the science stands so far, maybe also in relation to what Gerrit said.
Yeah, no, I think it's, you know, to back it up, I think it's very interesting that, and I notice this time and time again, the observation that farmers make on the ground by looking at their animals, right? And I'm thinking this animal is healthier, is happier, is probably more nutrient dense. The patients, as you talk about, Gerrit, as well, is that I sometimes feel like all we're doing is just putting scientific data behind it, right? But we're maybe kicking an open door. And if you tell a farmer, they'll say, yeah, of course, I already know this, I see this, right? And of course, we need data for the policy, and also have to, of course, be careful it doesn't become a self-fulfilling prophecy. So we have to be careful of that. But yeah, I mean, I think it was Justina that made that point. It's like we're feeding chicken corn and soy typically. Think about that. It's just another animal. If you fed a human corn and soy, you would think like, of course that person is not going to thrive, right? Of course that person is not going to be healthy, and yet we do that to our animals. And so I think that's sort of the mindset that we need to adopt. That we really see this as something that does directly impact us. And it is interesting also, not to go off too of a tangent, but even if you look at the International Agency on Cancer Research, it didn't come through in their executive summary, but there are plenty of tables in page 165 or something like that actually show or find that the association between cancer and red meat is still exclusive to processed meat. But if you lump them together, but if you look at unprocessed meat, there's no relationship. And I think that's also not really resonating with the consumer. And I think the committee could have done a better job of communicating that. And they have been since, but usually once the cat is out of the bag, it's hard to put it back in, right? So, but yeah, what we're seeing is we're definitely seeing these connections. We published a series of papers on beef and also on bison, and we also have work on chicken that we're going to publish. But yeah, you see that connection is that if the animal is out on the field, engaging in innate behavior, has the ability to exercise. I think that's something we also not always appreciate, the ability of the animal to walk. An animal out of pasture walks a lot more. So they look like an athlete. If you look at their mitochondria, which typically, the best way to describe it is if we look at the muscle of an animal out on pasture, they look like an endurance strength athlete. Now, I cannot say today whether that has a direct impact on us, but that one-to-one connection. But it is clear that the phenotype of an animal looks much more like an athletic animal versus maybe an animal which would be the human equivalent of someone who is not very sedentary. So this connection with humans is something that, and this comes back to the time frame. In our randomized controlled trials, we typically have a time frame of 3 months or so, because we feed people all of their foods, and we're going to try to bring it up to like 6 months. You do see health markers, improved biomarkers, but obviously no one develops heart disease in our study, and otherwise I'd probably have a problem. But you do see these initial biomarkers, and I think we need to wet that with more epidemiological data that asks people, like, do you consume foods from organic or regenerative or pasture system? And of course, people who typically source that have other health traits, right? That typically improve. But I think that's sort of, and then that connection with the farmer, we try to do a lot of work. A lot of the more recent papers have been just working with commercial farms on that, evaluating their practices. So I think, yes, what I notice in the scientific community, it's a growing field for sure. There's more recognition for that. So I do see the future as a positive one, but it's also, we're in early innings of that, and it's definitely a minority at the moment.
I think Garrett wanted to come in.
Yeah, I mean, if it's okay for all you guys, I would like to ask a question. Maybe it's too specific, or maybe it's just the right amount of specificity, because this is something that concerns me. And this is the topic of linoleic acid, which is an omega-6 fatty acid. And traditionally, we have this idea of arachidonic acid as an omega-6 fatty acid being the inflammatory fatty acids. People with rheumatic disease, they try to avoid it. But when we look at the actual food sources of omega-6, the linoleic acid in modern food is the higher contribution to the total omega-6. Linoleic acid traditionally comes from like seed oils. And what we found is in patients for the last 5-6 years, and there's studies more and more coming out in the last recent years that confirm this, that especially people with inflammatory disease, be it like Crohn's disease, celiac disease, but also people with atopic disease, like skin diseases or eczema, but also people with neurological disease, can it be migraines or psychiatric disease, they benefit immensely from highly reducing their linoleic acid contents. And at the same time, eggs are pretty nutrient dense. So we recommend the eggs, but we recommend to bring down the linoleic acid. And we haven't been successful so far to find a farmer or any farmer who could tell us, how do we have to treat chicken? And how do we have to feed chicken? Because they're a monogastric animal, they cannot convert the linoleic acid to stearic acid like the cows can, for example. How do we have to feed and treat chicken so the eggs and the meat has like a very low linoleic acid content?
Yeah, if I may respond to that, we have done various evaluations of farms, and that work is going to come out in the near future. We have tested farms that have an omega-6 to 3 ratio of about 1:1, 2:1, 3:1. So in this case, you have an equal amount of omega-3s and omega-6s. And for context, regular eggs typically are like 15:1 or so. So what we found was, if you feed proportionally less corn and soy, which are very high in omega-6s, and you feed things such as peas and oats and wheat and flaxseed, maybe some barley, and what some farmers are also doing is feeding even some fish meal if you have access to it. We have a farmer that is out here on the coast. Utah's not on the coast, but San Diego, California. It's pretty close by. He gets fish waste from the coast and feed some of it to his chickens in small amounts, so it doesn't start doesn't start to taste like cod or another fish. But my point is that by really proportionally feeding less high omega-6 feeds to the chickens and having that be out on pasture, eating some forages, eating some bugs as well, you can really bring that number down. And in the monogastrics, chickens and pigs particular, it's really, the effect is quite rapid on that. So you can achieve it, but yeah, you have to have a farmer who is willing to feed. Yeah, I can't believe I say it, alternative feeds, because it used to not be common to feed these massive quantities of corn and soy. But yeah, to feed those type of feeds. So it is possible, Gerrit. We've tested with very good ratios.
Awesome, cool, thank you. If I may follow up with one more, maybe you know also, how does that play out on the economic side for the farmer in terms of, like, because one farmer told me he has like a fear of when he does similar things like this, that the weight of the chicken comes down and he has economic issues?
Yeah, I can speak about that. We have removed the corn from our feed, chicken feed, and also we have decreased as much as we can the amount of soybean. We are ending the chicken oil with a 3% of soybean. The question is that if you remove entirely the soy from the feed, for the alternative is quite expensive. For example, we are going to start our research in February and March, working with insect flour, okay? But the cost of this feed is maybe doubling the soy feed, you know? And actually, for example, Salatin tried 3 years ago, feed a group of their chicken without soybeans, and the consumer refused this meat. You know, the period of growing this chicken increased more than 50%. We have here in Spain a farm that give no soy feed for the chicken, and the cost for one chicken is 49 euros. It's about $49. So I think that with chicken is so difficult. Trying to reduce. We are working with alternative with peas and then sunflowers, and a very complex feed for the chicken, and allowing them to feed with the natural insect that they find on the field. The grassland, I think is so much important. And I want to add that for sure, Gary, because it's a common result, but we did 1 year and a half also our research with the beef that we produce, and also we have an Spanish association for grass-fed beef producer, and it's beautiful because we compare with the organic meat and also with the conventional meat. We obtained the same result in the entire world. We arrived to 14 times omega-6 to omega-3 in the conventional beef. We reduced until 9 omega-6 to omega-3 in the organic, because they're still feeding with grain. And all of the sample, we measured 72 samples from the different farmers in Spain, and all of them was below 2.2, the ratio omega-6 and omega, and a lot of them very near 1-to-1. So it's so incredible, Gary, the different, only feeding with grain. How can grain only affect the metabolism and the biological function of the so yeah, we are in our family for sure with more beef than chicken, and we are also a chicken producer, but I think the beef is the future.
Into the future beef farmer, Justina.
Yeah, I wanted to add, once Salatin told the sentence I really liked, is that poultry used to be the food of the kings, and nowadays they have quite opposite. And I mentioned in the beginning that we stop chicken as an enterprise, and we are growing just for ourselves, for the king feed, for the king food, And the reason why we do that is basically because of the feed. Since I didn't want to feed them corn and soy, we had to introduce insect meal. It was difficult to find. Then we introduced a fish meal with the peas. It was really expensive, and as Jose said, the period it took for the chicken to grow longer. And then you have that chicken, and you realize that the chicken is not a white meat; it's red meat. Then it has longer growing period. So yeah, I see chicken, poultry. I mean, as a quite big problem, and beef and all the herbivores should be the main meat, at least from the farmer's perspective.
Thank you.
I do agree from my perspective, from a health perspective, we teach our patients to do ruminating animals primarily because of the omega-3s, because of the phytochemicals that accumulate in those animals. And yeah.
Thank you. I mean, two little points. Maybe could you post, Garrett, this stuff on Bendor in the chat?
Sure.
And I was thinking, Dolph, you also have chickens, no? What do you feed? Can Garrett order?
Yes,
Okay.
hi all. Yes, we have two mobile chicken facilities containing each 250 chickens, laying hens. We move them around once a week, once every 10 days. I should move them more often, but it's just a young family, life is busy. I feed them around 55% of our own grown wheat. I sometimes, or last year, I grew wheat with peas as a polyculture, and I have added some sorghum in there as well. And then additionally, we buy around 45 to 50% of a pre-mixed food with most of the proteins in it and minerals, salts, all these kind of stuff. But so their main diet is wheat. And in this mix that we buy, well, there's a whole list in there, but it's generally a lot of these cake that is left after pressing oil from, for example, sunflowers, hemp. I don't know, it changes a little bit according to what I can get, but it is quite a diverse mixture. That's it, yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dolph. Mark, you have a question? Please.
Thanks for all the really wonderful information. I do have a question. Obviously, producing these nutritionally dense products is, I think, really important, and it's reliant on healthy soils, healthy ecosystems, people that are knowledgeable and such. But at the sort of end of the consumer, price sensitivity is a big factor here, I think, and with that comes equity, right? So the access of people who can afford to purchase organic products. Just, today I was buying bio-sugar versus regular refined sugar. And the price difference is 40% just on sugar at the local store. And I was sort of wondering, where are opportunities maybe that you guys see in your own production to have these more nutritionally dense foods available to people that can perhaps lower costs, or different systems of distribution are the answers? I'm really curious, as obviously there's a lot of experience in this meeting to kind of make these foods more accessible, and also obviously educating people about these kinds of things is a really big factor here, as sort of was mentioned, that people are not necessarily aware of this, of the differences in the nutritional quality of the products they're eating, and where that comes from. So I guess it's a bit of a two-part question: consumer education and price point for sort of having it more available to more people.
Sorry, guys, I was on mute. Thank you for these two questions, Mark. Yeah, I would just also add to Jose Luis, do you see a future where you can, at cost, I mean, outproduce cheaper because your inputs are getting cheaper, maybe of the conventionals? And maybe also, Stefan, you shared that you're collecting data from so many farms also in the US, if maybe you also took in economic data. Jose Luis, please.
Yeah, for sure. We need more information and technical information about how we improve the efficiency of our production ways. But for sure, in order that we are a small producer, all the system work against us. One example, I'm paying near €2 per kilogram of meat that I am delivering directly to consumer per kilogram. So it's huge, the price of delivering in our case. And in order that we should be able to arrive to bigger farms in order to access to the more efficiency logistic, ways and companies, they're going to be also cheaper. For example, another ways is innovation and technology. Another example is now I am pasturing my cows with GPS and virtual fence that currently is quite expensive because there's only one company who is producing this kind of collar, but for sure, Mark, in the next 5 years, dozens of companies are going to arrive and decrease mostly these prices. And I decrease 85% my employees' cost moving the cows. So because the concept is virtual fencing, so we are able to move 4 times per day using my cell phone. So it's absolutely incredible how it works. So yes, but I want to come to the first point. We need more research. We need more practical and technical research about how to increase and scale. And Mark, in United States, is pasture birds. They are producing 1,500,000 birds per year. So yeah, there is new ways and new companies and farmers that want are investing in researching and in developing new facilities to scale this production.
Amazing. Thank you. And I think after then, Stefan, that also can bring us to the question of Nadja that she raised in the chat. And I also always wanted to know what is the feed composition of pasture birds. So maybe Stefan knows.
Yeah, I know the feed composition of pasture bird. Yeah, it's probably corn and soy. So I actually don't know, but we've tested the meat and it's that's my guess. So in terms of let me start with the question on economics. I think, and this is, it comes back to equity, accessibility, affordability. I get that. How the farmer now, at least in the US, does it, and it sounds like Jose Luis does the same thing, is direct to consumer. And you can find a good amount of consumers that is willing to pay extra for healthy food. And then we can have a bigger discussion is that you either invest in your food now and less in your healthcare later, less in, you'll be able to be more energetic, you're more active, you're healthier, you're able to maybe, as a society, you don't pay the things down the line. So it's a discussion we can have for 5 hours on whether if I buy chicken cheap at the grocery store, whether my $1 a pound chicken is truly reflecting the cost of that. And am I paying cost elsewhere with environmental pollution, with healthcare, with missed economic opportunity because I'm not the healthiest I can be. So I think these are important things to think. And then talk about Nadja, I disagree on that because we have modeled it off of beef. So because what we see also in this work is that if you start to integrate multiple animals within the same system, lamb, so sheep, with beef, maybe with chickens, they can be on the same field and they're not on the same field all at the same time, right? Per se. So you actually start to see that you double or triple the amount that you eat. Yes, if it was only beef that we eat, then or maybe goat elsewhere, or if we, let's just say it, if we had meat from monocultures, then maybe that would be the case. But if we are willing to diversify our meat intake and maybe even eat very efficient herbivores like duck and geese, and think outside of the box, then it does seem like when you model that you triple or double the amount of meat you can produce per acre of field. And we also don't have modeled crops and animal agriculture separately, and those can also be oftentimes integrated. So I think that's an important point, because the animals, even though you're using 100 acres of land, they're not on that 100 acres all at the same time, right? So I think that's an important point, but I'll leave it at there.
Jose Luis, please.
Yeah, very shortly, Stefan, not in Europe, because you are not allowed to keep chicken with cows in the same land. So it's a nightmare.
Yeah, and then the answer would be no, then we can't do it. Yeah.
It's horrible, because we have to fight against everything, fight against some part of the vegan population, this idea, the false on information, and also against the law, because but yeah, we will.
Yeah, well, it works very well to have chickens and cattle, because if you rotate the cattle, you have the chicken.
Absolutely. But say to our politician.
Yeah, I get it. Well, I don't really get it, but I understand that they do it for food safety reasons, probably. But yeah, it's not a good policy. Yeah, science would also suggest otherwise. Yeah.
Jose Luis, can't you take the chickens also to your friend when you bring the dogs when the guys are coming?
No, Simon, what happened? Maybe 4 to 5 times per year, my cows were escaped into the chicken area, and I said, "Oh my God, they are here again, cleaning the grass."
Wonderful. With an eye to time, because we want to be extremely respectful, and as Jose Luis has wisely predicted in the beginning, we can go on for hours. And I think, yeah, I would love to touch also still on sugar. I mean, kind of all our discussion evolved around fat, but then there's a whole discussion also why we look at fat so much and not sugar. I mean, the sugar industry, as it's now very known in the US, has worked night and day to make sure of our focus on that. But I promised to go to Nadia's question. I think it was kind of induced also by Stefan of this multiple land use. So a question is maybe what's about the land take or the land use of meat if we want to come to that diet. I personally would make like a few little comments and then see if you also want to come in. I mean, grassland is the greatest biome on Earth. I think we still have not quite understood how many, I mean, with the Bendor science, how much herbivores and other animals were around fertilizing and grazing the land. And I mean, one tiny example I like to make, because also Jose Luis made that point in the beginning. If we see that it's stated that 18,000 liters of water are needed for a kilogram of beef, there all the rainwater that has fallen on the land where the beef is not for the whole year is accounted into that calculation. And I think then that is also still only an efficiency calculation. So what if we would have turned that grassland into a field for a plant-based diet managed in the conventional land? All that water would not have infiltrated, but would have caused a huge flood downhill. So I think really this multiple land use is the answer to this kind of land take argument of free roaming meat production. I don't know if any one of you wants to answer also to Nadia. And otherwise, I'm looking, Anna still has her hand up.
I would like to add one.
Yes, thank you.
It won't be data or numbers. It's just a real life situation. We here in Lithuania, we have problem with pastures, natural ones, because they are declining since we are in a forest zone. So the bushes are coming, and you have to keep pasture with the herbivores. And from at least Lithuanian perspective, I see that we need more animals, and we can at least grow animals for our country, maybe even export something. So that land question is always very hard, and it depends on the country, and it has to be more contextual, maybe. I think that, yeah, maybe, let's say it's not good, then you cut the forests, but here in Lithuania, we can have a lot of cows, and we need actually them.
Yeah, wonderful. I think we have many farmers also in EARA doing that. That's a super important point. Thank you.
In fact, if I may come in there, using cattle to manage those forests is actually using land that is not being used for other kind of production. And that's something that people like Jose Luis and other farmers are experiencing, the possibilities that virtual fencing, for example, offers in that respect of being able to access all those forests and mountains with the cattle, and also doing that fire prevention role, which is absolutely essential as well, especially in Mediterranean countries where fire is such a threat. So there's a lot of land that can still be put to use to produce animals, and with all the positive benefits that brings. And responding a little bit to Mark's question about the economy, what farmers, I work with the Spanish network of regenerative farmers, and one thing that they absolutely see in their realities is that for many of them, to produce regeneratively actually reduces costs significantly, because it means connecting their production to their own resources and increasing those natural resources all the time through that improved management of those resources. And so there's more pasture. You don't need to buy more land. You can produce more on your same land. And another thing that they're seeing they're reducing is the vet costs. The animals are much, much healthier. Some farmers report 80-90% reduction in vet costs, which is amazing. And that has absolutely nothing to do with the health of those animals. Obviously, they're more healthy, therefore they don't need vets as much. And so that is a win-win situation for all. So focusing as well on the solutions, which is one of our things that we like to do, is to focus on solutions. There is, as Jose Luis was saying, the legality needs to change. There's all these legal regulations that are stopping people from doing these amazing types of management, and that needs to change. And also consumer mindsets need to change. The information that they are getting needs to change as well. So that's where science, Stefan, can come in and must come in more and more to debunk that information that is erroneous, that's wrong, and to really prove the case that farmers are seeing empirically in their land, on their animals, and that needs to be proven scientifically so that other circles will also believe it. And on that note, I'd like to ask you all to please share your top 3 studies. Jarrett has been sharing some links there in the chat. It'd be great if the rest of you could as well, and not just the speakers, but anyone else who has any, like, wow, this is an amazing study that you would recommend to talk about nutrition and human and animal health connected to soil health, all of these things we're talking about today. And I will actually help Jose Luis out with that. I'll do his homework for him, because we actually just published an article today in the Spanish network that he helped, and all the sources that he provided for that article, which actually talks exactly about that, about the nutritional content of meats that are produced in this way, regeneratively, and grass-fed meat, how it is just so much more nutrient dense and valuable nutrients. So I'm going to share that in the chat. It is in Spanish, but as you know, Google Translate is the perfect blend for everyone. So I'll put that in the chat, and just encouraging everyone, because it's got the sources there, the scientific sources there as well. And encouraging anyone else who has a study they'd like to share, please do in the chat. Thank you. Back over to Jared. I think you've been wanting to say something for a while, yeah? You had your hand up there. If you would like to. Or back to Simon.
Yeah, gladly, thank you. I mean, with watching our last 3 minutes appear and being aware we can and want to continue, maybe we do a closing round. If not, anyone has a burning question to anyone else right now, in which each of you four gives one principle for healthy eating, and trying that one builds on the next, of course. And Garrett already unmuted himself, so now he's ready, I feel.
Yeah, sure. I'm going to share the principle that I share with all the patients. And this is a self-regulating principle, because we feel like when we teach this self-regulating principle, a whole new world opens up for the patients. And the self-regulating principle is, before you eat something, set an intention. I also teach this to my daughter. I teach to her, she's 2.5 years old, and we talk about this, like, what do you wish from this food? Like, you wish to be more active, more clearly, you want to have this food to calm you down a little bit so you could be ready for sleep. So what are your wishes and for this, what you consume? So this gives us intentionality and awareness. And then 30 minutes after you've eaten it, check in with yourself and see if the food gave you what you wished for. Because now it seems so simple, but for most people, this is a completely new world, because now they can start the feedback loop with themselves, and they do not have to rely on the new study that comes out or the external resource or this doctor and that doctor, those conflicting evidences here, and this guy says that, and this guy says that, because now they have a feedback loop with themselves. And it's a very, very simple principle that we found to be an absolute game changer, to have people really, and to give them the chance to be really self-reliant and to grow in their learning curve about food. And we found when the people start with that principle, they get so much more questions. They want to learn so much more about food. They want to learn, like, what food affects me like this. They ask other people the question, like, how does that food affect you? And we found that to be really, really helpful. Instead of teaching them like a specific thing about food, more is teaching them a biofeedback loop that they can use to grow their learning curve.
Amazing. What a kickoff. Jose Luis, you want to go next?
Two very short. I say all the time short answer, but I didn't do it shortly. Two very short points. I have put on the chat incredible research that have been done in Spain with 1,500 children from 2010 until 2016. 60% of our children were positive in urine to diacinone, that there is a forbidden product in Europe sign 27. So we have not speak about the rest of pesticide, and also we can in another future conversation about the multi-resistant antibiotic tool in the farming, but I have everything is relationship. The last point is that in our family, we don't believe in God, but we were one day walking our farm and my wife told me, speak about energy, nutrient density, whatever you want, but you cannot compare eating those kind of animal, eating free in the field with a feedlot. So yeah, we can speak about, energy, nutrient density, omega-3, but finally is another kind of product, another kind of life, and we have to go forward in this new way.
Amazing. Thank you. Stefan, how about you?
Yeah, it's hard to, it'll be hard to top that, but no, I fully agree with that. And you know, it's hard to eat healthy in our current society because there is a lot of ultra processed food available, a lot of junk food available, and I what I've noticed and what I've noticed from other people as well is once you start to appreciate whole foods and those nuances of flavor and the depthness of the flavor that may get from an animal that is out grazing or from a strawberry that is grown in a regenerative field instead of the stuff that tastes more like water with a slight hint of strawberry, right? So once you start appreciating those flavors and you really start to also make sure that you limit the amount of ultra processed food that you get into the house, because you know if I have a bunch of stuff laying around, I'll eat it too. That's human nature. So it's not weakness of people, but I think once you get to that, is that my simple point I'm trying to say is that try to organize your life in a way that you start eating whole foods, and then you'll feel better. You'll feel more energized. You'll, like as Jose Luis said, you feel sort of the connection with the land. If you also source from local farmers where possible, or even visit your farmer, this will help you. I think make that shift and ensure that you can work on the healthiest version of you.
Thank you, Stefan. And Justina, why don't you bring us home?
So I agree with Garrett's idea about intention, because I do think that it's mind over matter. And yeah, not everyone can become a farmer as I did. It's never have been my dream to be a farmer, but I did to feed my kids the best food I can give to them. So I just think that we should do the best we can. And I saw the last question here in the chat about the Dan Kittredge, that device. Yeah, it would be perfect to have one on our hand, and it would be much easier for us to choose at least the best food from, you know, what we can choose. Yeah.
Thank you, Justina. As for wonderful ending statements. Thank you all for your time. Sam, yes, sorry, I think I only know that they need some more time to calibrate and collect more data. That's my latest state. We also work with him. Some of our farmers had him on the farm in Portugal at Vivid Foods, I think a few months ago. Thank you all for joining tonight, and we will save the chat for sure, and we can all go into our nights, Christmas, and I guess all of here will celebrate that with as little processed food as possible and as many regeneratively grown produce as possible too. So thank you all for joining us, helping for the series. All my thanks also to Anna for facilitating all the episodes, and even more so for Virginia to producing, organizing everything to make these discussions possible.